The kitchen smelled of rosemary and butter, the kind of scent that clung to my clothes and hair no matter how many windows I cracked open. I had spent 3 long days chopping, stirring, and baking an entire feast for Marina's family reunion. On the counter, trays of baked pasta cooled beside a golden roast chicken, and 2 apple pies waited on the sill to catch the last of the winter breeze. As I reached for nutmeg in Saul's old recipe box, a slip of paper fluttered out and landed on the counter. My hands stilled. It wasn't a shopping list or a faded clipping, but a folded letter. The ink browned with age. My heart tightened when I saw the date 8 years ago. Just before Saul's final surgery, I unfolded it carefully, afraid the paper might tear. His handwriting, strong even in sickness, told me, if Marina ever turns your kitchen into a stage for her ambitions, remember that truth is stronger than appearances. Do not let her silence you. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Saul had always noticed what I tried to ignore, that Marina lived for show, for the approval of neighbors and colleagues. I had brushed off his worries, telling myself it was simply youthful pride. But standing there, with flour on my apron and aching feet, the letter felt like a warning meant for this very day. I slipped it into my pocket, telling myself not to think about it. Today was about family. Marina had invited me, after all, to contribute to her big event in her new house with the glass facade she was so proud of. Maybe if I brought enough food, if I showed up with my best recipes, we might find a way back to each other. I packed the casseroles into carriers, wrapped the pies in foil, and lifted the weight of the meal into my arms. The letter pressed against my side with each step, as if Saul were walking with me, reminding me that appearances could be shattered in a moment. By evening, I was ready to leave my kitchen behind and step into Marina's world. By the time I reached Marina's walkway, the sky had folded into dusk. The stone steps seemed steeper with every carrier I balanced against my chest. My knuckles throbbed, but I kept climbing, telling myself the weight meant something, that effort still counted for love. The door opened before I could knock. Warm light spilled onto the porch, revealing a blur of perfume and silk. Well-dressed guests brushed past me with polite nods, and I smiled back, though sweat dampened the collar of my blouse. Inside, Marina's house gleamed with polished marble and windows so tall they mirrored the last streaks of the sunset. It was all glass and shine, a place built to be looked at rather than lived in. Marina stood near the fireplace, a silver-sheathed dress clinging to her like armor. Her laughter rang out like rehearsed lines on a stage, her hand sweeping gracefully as she poured champagne into fragile flutes. When she spotted me, her smile thinned, almost as though she hadn't expected me to actually show up with more than a token plate of cookies. I carried my dishes to the dining table, arranging them carefully among the catered trays and platters already lined up. My arms ached, but I kept my head high. That was when Marina's voice cut through the chatter, pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. Good. We'll have plenty. If there's extra, the dogs can eat Mom's dishes after the real meal. The silence hit like a slap. Guests shifted in their seats, glances darting my way. A nervous chuckle here, a cough there. My heart clenched so tightly I thought it might burst. 16 hours of cooking, a month's budget in groceries, and my daughter reduced it all to scraps for the animals. I forced a smile, though my hands trembled against the edge of the table. In my pocket, Saul's letter pressed hard against my hip, as if reminding me I had been warned. Guests turned away quickly, unwilling to cross Marina. For 3 years I had endured such moments quietly, but standing in that glittering room, I felt something inside me shift. The evening stretched on like a performance no one believed in, but no one dared interrupt. I moved slowly from group to group. Balancing a glass of water, I barely sipped. The air was thick, brittle. Laughter pitched too high, as though everyone feared silence might reveal what was truly happening. Each time I circled back to the buffet, my stomach tightened. My casseroles sat at the far edge, lids still closed. Pies untouched, as if they carried a warning sign. Guests spooned delicately from the catered trays while pretending not to notice my food. Shame burned deep in my chest. Tangled with fury, I tried to swallow down. Conversations rose and fell around me. Promotions, kitchen renovations, ski trips, all threaded with Marina's voice correcting details, embellishing successes, inserting herself into every story. She shone too brightly, as though desperate to blind everyone to the shadows. Owen lingered near the wall, silent, jaw locked, his glass empty. Their teenage son slipped through the sliding door onto the patio, hunched over his phone, the glow of the screen easier to face than his mother's spotlight. I caught fragments that sliced me open. She tries too hard. Poor woman. For a moment I thought they meant Marina, but their glances landed on me. Pity stung worse than cruelty. Memory after memory surfaced. Marina ridiculing my coupons at the grocery store, mocking the hem I hand-stitched on my dress, dismissing my advice on raising children. Each cut I had endured quietly now throbbed in the bright, sterile light of her new home. My fingers brushed the letter in my pocket. Saul had seen this coming. He knew Marina's need for control would one day leave me standing small in a room filled with witnesses. I had ignored him, blinded by loneliness, desperate for inclusion. But tonight, the humiliation hardened into something sharper. Across the room, Marina leaned toward Valencia, whispering with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Eyes flicked to me, then to my untouched pies. The insult festered, demanding release, and I felt resolve gather in my chest like a storm. Marina's laugh rang out again, that high, cutting sound that had already sliced me open once tonight. "Well," she said, swirling her champagne, "if there's too much, we can always send the leftovers home for the dogs." The glass in my hand clicked hard against the table as I set it down. The music slipped into silence between tracks, leaving only the hum of the fireplace and the rustle of shifting bodies. Every face turned toward me, expectant, wary. I cleared my throat. My voice was calm, though my pulse hammered. "Since we're being honest," I said, "why don't I share what Marina really thinks of each of you?" The words cut through the air like a blade. Marina's smile faltered, her hand tightening around the stem of her glass. For once, she had no ready reply. I turned first to Valencia. "Marina told me last month that you're nothing but a leech, that you brag about listings you barely earn, and that your clients end up with someone else doing the real work." Valencia's jaw dropped, her eyes flicking from me to Marina in disbelief, then to Owen's partner, standing stiff near the window. "She said you're incompetent, that the firm keeps you on out of pity, that you're more of a liability than an asset." His face drained of color. I looked at my cousin Lydia, who was clutching her clutch so tightly her knuckles whitened. "She texted me pictures of you at last year's reunion, called you careless, said you'd let yourself go." She laughed about it for days. Each truth landed with the weight of a stone breaking the surface of water. Faces blanched, whispers hissed through the room. Somewhere to my left, a wine glass shattered on the floor. "Mom, stop," Marina cried, her voice pitched higher than usual. But the strength she always wielded so easily wasn't there. For the first time in years, her control wavered, her mask slipping as 23 pairs of eyes shifted from her to me, waiting for what would come next. The silence after my words was sharp, but then came the low murmur of shifting voices. Guests glanced at one another, searching for confirmation in each other's eyes. I stood still, hands steady at last, letting the weight of the truths settle across the room. It was Valencia who broke first. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried. I heard her say that. Too. She looked straight at Marina, betrayal carved into her features. You called me a leech in front of your Pilates group. You laughed when I asked for your help with that sale. A ripple passed through the crowd. Another guest, Owen's junior partner, raised his hand hesitantly. She told me you'd never last at the firm, he said, his eyes fixed on the floor, that you were dead weight. The whispers grew into a current of admissions. People remembered, piecing together moments they'd brushed aside as harmless gossip. Marina's cruelty, once confined to private corners, now spread under the bright light of public recognition. From the fireplace, Owen finally moved. His eyes were shadowed, his face lined with something that looked like exhaustion more than anger. I've heard it too, he said, his voice rough. For years. Belittling, mocking, our friends, our neighbors, even family. His hand shook as he set down his empty glass. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to make a scene, but I should have said something sooner. His confession sent another shockwave through the room. Guests no longer looked at me with doubt, but at Marina with a mixture of suspicion and disgust. The air thickened with accusation. Valencia demanded answers. Lydia muttered prayers under her breath. Owen's partner glared. Marina's polished mask cracked with every word spoken against her. The woman who built her identity on control and charm was suddenly stripped bare in front of everyone she had worked so hard to impress. I stood quietly, letting their voices carry what I had started. Marina's world was crumbling, not from my words alone, but from the chorus that rose against her. Marina's voice rose into a shriek, sharp enough to rattle the chandelier. She's inventing all of this. My own mother is so desperate for attention, she'll say anything to embarrass me. Her eyes darted wildly from face to face, searching for someone to nod, someone to laugh and smooth it over. None did. I reached calmly into my pocket. My fingers brushed Saul's letter before finding the phone I had tucked there. If I'm inventing lies, I said, my voice steady, then explain this. I tapped the screen, and the room filled with Marina's voice. Laughter that wasn't rehearsed, but cutting. The kind she saved for private moments. Valencia brags like she's the queen of real estate, but she couldn't sell water in a desert. She sneered on one recording. Another clip played, Lydia should give up on those diets. Nothing hides a body like hers. Then Owen's partner's name, woven with insults about incompetence. Gasps rippled through the guests as their own faces and flaws came alive in Marina's unmistakable tone. I watched their mouths part, eyes flicker, shoulders stiffen. Truth echoed from the tiny speaker louder than any denial. Marina lunged forward, snatching for the phone, but I stepped back quickly, holding it to my chest. This isn't the only copy, I warned, my eyes locked on hers. Don't think you can silence me by breaking one device. Around the room, guests raised their own phones, recording the spectacle. The hiss of cameras activating, the glow of screens capturing every second. It was the sound of her carefully built reputation crumbling in real time. In my mind, Saul's words flared like a torch. Truth is stronger than appearances. I had carried his warning without knowing when I would need it. Now it steadied me, anchoring me as Marina's silver mask shattered. She screamed something incoherent, but her voice was drowned by the whispers. The recording, the blinking red lights of phones trained on her downfall, and as the weight of silence settled once more, I knew the night wasn't finished. The consequences of what I had unleashed would follow me out the door. The night air hit me like a slap, sharp and cold. my breath rising in quick clouds as I hurried down the stone walkway. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Behind me, Marina's voice shrieked through the open door, demanding Owen's loyalty. Her words tangled with rage. Guests spilled out into the driveway, muttering, shaking their heads, scattering like survivors from a wreck they hadn't seen coming. I loaded my empty hands into the car, leaving the food behind on her table. It didn't matter anymore. The weight I carried out wasn't in dishes, but in years of silence finally broken. By morning, the world outside her glass house knew what had happened inside it. Videos of the confrontation had flooded social media overnight. Shaky phone footage of my voice, Marina's protests, the gasps of her guests. Headlines in local community groups read, "The perfect hostess exposed." Her glossy reputation dissolved in hours. The same people who had once admired her now dissecting every word, every sneer, every denial. The calls started before noon. Valencia's voice cracked as she told me she had been trapped in a toxic friendship for years, too afraid to step away until the truth came out. Another guest, his voice heavy with shame, admitted that hearing Marina's mockery of his drinking problem had jolted him into seeking help. For the first time, I realized what I'd done wasn't just for me. It had freed others, too. But then came David. His voice trembled with anger and hurt. "Mom, you humiliated my sister in front of everyone. The kids are crying, asking why Grandma made their mom look like a villain. How do I explain this?" His anguish pierced deeper than any insult Marina had ever thrown at me. I gripped the phone, listening to the ache in his silence, knowing this storm was far from over. The cost of truth was coming due, and it would not be measured in strangers' approval, but in the fragile bonds of my own family. David showed up unannounced on a gray afternoon, his knock softer than I remembered. I opened the door to find him standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Without a word, he stepped inside. The familiarity of my small apartment wrapping around us both like an old quilt. I set coffee on the table, the same table where he'd once done homework and eaten bowls of cereal before school. He cupped the mug, but didn't drink, just stared into the dark liquid as though it might offer answers. Finally, he looked at me. Why now? Why humiliate her like that? His voice cracked, and I heard the weight of torn loyalties beneath it. I breathed in, steadying myself. 3 years, David. 3 years of being told I was nothing but a burden. 3 years of her mocking my clothes, my advice, the way I live. I swallowed it because I was afraid of losing you, of losing the children. But silence didn't make it better. It only made her bolder. And when she laughed about feeding my food to the dogs, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes, fighting tears. I knew. Mom, I heard some of the things she said. I told myself it wasn't serious, that she didn't mean it. I didn't want to believe she could be that cruel. His voice broke, and the first tear slipped free. But now everyone's talking about it, and I can't unsee what she really is. I don't know how to stand between you. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. His skin was warm, trembling under my touch. You don't have to stand between us, sweetheart. But you do have to decide where your respect lies. Mine will never come cheap again. His shoulders shook, and he bowed his head, torn between blood and loyalty. I poured him another cup, the steam curling upward, and waited in silence for the choice that would reshape our family. 3 days after David left my apartment, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. When I answered, a measured voice greeted me. Mrs. Whitford, this is Gregory Halloran. I was Saul's attorney. I need you to come by my office. There's something we need to discuss. I sat frozen long after the call ended. the sound of Saul's name spoken aloud, pulling me back into a space I thought I had sealed away. By the next morning, I was seated in Gregory's paneled office, the scent of leather and dust heavy in the air. He opened a locked drawer and placed a thick file on the desk between us. "Your husband left these with me," he explained, separate from his will. He gave specific instructions: these assets, property deeds, savings accounts. An investment fund would pass solely to you if you ever showed the courage to stand against ongoing disrespect from family. If not, they were to dissolve into charitable trusts. My breath caught as I flipped through the pages. Bank statements, property titles, numbers that blurred through tears. Nearly $1 million money I never knew existed. Prepared quietly by the man who always thought ahead. At the back of the file was a tab labeled Operation Hearth. Saul's handwriting outlined his vision. I was to reclaim dignity through truth, to never again accept humiliation in exchange for belonging. I pressed my hand to my mouth as the tears fell. All those years I thought he was gone, and here he was, reaching across time to remind me of my worth. This was not just an inheritance. It was validation, proof that Saul had trusted my strength even when I doubted it myself. Gregory's voice was gentle. He believed you would know when the moment came, and he believed you'd rise to meet it. I closed the file carefully, the weight of it both terrifying and liberating. Saul had built a foundation beneath my feet, and now it was mine to stand on. When I stepped back out into the daylight, I knew my fight with Marina was no longer about survival. It was about what I would build next. Months passed, and with them, the storm of gossip faded into something quieter, something sturdier. I had taken the inheritance Saul left me and turned it into a living thing, a neighborhood kitchen cooperative, in a modest brick storefront just a few blocks from my apartment. The air now carried the scent of stews, bread, and laughter. Seniors gathered at long wooden tables to chop vegetables, share recipes, and swap stories. Families came in not to admire a display, but to sit and eat together. To remember that food was never meant for performance, but for belonging. On the walls, I hung photographs of our shared meals, children with tomato sauce on their cheeks, hands reaching across bowls of salad, neighbors laughing mid-bite. It wasn't polished, and it wasn't perfect. That was exactly why it felt real. On opening night, David arrived with his children. They burst through the door, their small arms wrapping around my waist. "Grandma, can we help set the tables?" they asked, already reaching for napkins and cups. David smiled at me, tired but softer than I'd seen him in years. Watching him stack chairs beside his children, I felt a peace settle in my bones. Then the door opened again, and the air shifted. Marina stood there, hesitant, her silver armor gone. The brightness she once wore like a crown had dimmed. Friends had left her. Her social circle had crumbled. She looked at the crowded tables, the photos on the walls, the hum of joy that no performance could manufacture. I met her gaze, steady and calm. "Here, food is never fed to dogs," I said softly, "only shared with those who appreciate it." She lowered her eyes, no reply on her lips, and slipped into the corner shadows, unseen by most. The evening moved on, laughter rising, plates clattering, stories spilling across the tables. Surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, I felt Saul's presence as if he were sitting beside me. He had been right all along. Truth reshaped everything, and I had finally built a table of my own.